Something unbelievable is happening in Cleveland right now, and if you thought this year's quarterback drama was wild before, trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. Because the chaos unfolding behind closed doors has nothing to do with playbooks, defensive schemes, or performance on the field. No. This storm is being fueled by something far more explosive: ego, public betrayal, and a social media war that's dragging the entire Browns organization straight into the spotlight. At the center of it all, two young quarterbacks fighting for their future, one mysteriously benched despite being cleared to play, and the other thrown into a broken system with expectations set impossibly high. But the real shocker is how everything spiraled out of control the moment Dillon Gabriel's fiancé jumped online, started taking shots at Shedeur Sanders, and turned a quiet internal battle into a public circus seen by millions. Suddenly, accusations started flying, claims of favoritism, claims of racism, and whispers coming out of the locker room that people were secretly cheering when Gabriel went down. A franchise already famous for chaos is now facing something even more dangerous: division from the inside. And the craziest part? This entire controversy might have absolutely nothing to do with football performance at all. Because once you peel back the surface, what's happening in Cleveland starts to look less like a quarterback competition and more like a power struggle built on pride, money, and desperation. And what comes next could change everything. But before we get there, we need to start with the moment this entire situation exploded. It all begins with one moment, a moment that didn't just confuse fans, but sent shockwaves through the NFL. 2 weeks ago, Dillon Gabriel, the highly publicized rookie quarterback who the Browns invested huge hope and ego into, vanished from the field. Not injured in some gruesome collision, not carted off, not ruled out for the season. He simply disappeared. 1 week he was the starter, the centerpiece of Cleveland's offensive plans. And the next, he was nowhere to be found. The official explanation? Concussion protocol. A phrase we've heard countless times in football. A phrase that usually comes with compassion, caution, and respect for player safety. But something about this story didn't sit right. Not with the fans, not with the analysts, and certainly not with people inside the building. Because while the Browns publicly insisted Gabriel had to sit out to recover, something quietly leaked from inside the organization that changed the entire narrative. Gabriel had already been cleared to play. Cleared by medical staff. Cleared by independent neurologists. Cleared to return to action. According to people close to the team, Gabriel was fully ready to go this past week. And yet, while suited up and standing on the sideline, he never stepped foot onto that field, not for a single snap, not even a handoff. He stood there, stone frozen, helmet in hand, watching the offense run without him. No snaps. No packages. No rotation. Nothing. A medically cleared quarterback glued to the bench like the seat was coated in cement. And that's when people started asking questions. If he's healthy, why isn't he playing? If the team believes in him, why is he standing still? If he's the future, why does it look like they're hiding him? And all of this becomes especially baffling when you rewind just a little further to one of the most reckless games the Browns have played in recent memory, the night the coaching staff allowed Gabriel to throw the ball 52 times. 52 passing attempts. Let that number sink in. For a rookie quarterback still adjusting to NFL speed. For a player who was visibly overwhelmed and struggling from the opening drive. For a team with a weak offensive line and receiving core already frustrated with target distribution. It wasn't just questionable strategy, it was borderline sabotage. Analysts described Gabriel's performance that night as chaotic, panicked, and completely out of sync. He wasn't reading the field. He wasn't protecting the football. He wasn't managing the moment. And rather than protecting him, the Browns doubled down. Pass play after pass play, shot after shot. It almost felt like they were trying to prove something, like they wanted to justify a decision that had already been made long before the season even began. And after that disastrous outing, something changed. Not gradually, not over time, instantly. The next time the Browns took the field, Gabriel wasn't the starter. The next time the media asked for an update, the tone turned vague. The next time fans looked to the sideline, they saw a ghost dressed in uniform. Now here's the part that nobody wants to admit publicly, even inside the building. That benching wasn't about health, it was about self-preservation. Because behind the scenes, the people who pushed hardest for Gabriel to start, the coaches who vouched for him, the executives who tied their reputations to him, and the agent who negotiated guarantees tied to playing time were staring at a harsh truth. The experiment failed. The front office bet big. The coaching staff bet bigger. And when the wheels fell off, someone had to take the fall. But instead of accepting responsibility or admitting the mistake publicly, they chose silence. They chose confusion. They chose optics. And they created the illusion of a medical hold, hoping to buy time to figure out what to do next without enraging the fan base or revealing how little confidence they truly had left. Yet their strategy backfired in the worst possible way, not because fans were patient, but because of what happened when Shedeur Sanders stepped into the spotlight. Here was a young quarterback who had barely practiced as QB1, stepping into a dysfunctional offense filled with resentment and egos. He was handed the ball not because he won the job, but because the Browns ran out of excuses. And instead of opening up the playbook, instead of giving him the same freedom Gabriel was gifted for 52 reckless throws, they tightened the leash until it choked the offense entirely. Suddenly, Sanders wasn't allowed to air it out. Suddenly, deep shots disappeared. Suddenly, the playbook shrank to checkdowns and safe screens. And the message to the league was clear. Gabriel gets opportunities. Sanders gets limitations. So naturally, people began asking the most uncomfortable question of all. Was Gabriel benched to protect his reputation instead of the team? Because if the Browns had thrown him back onto the field after being cleared to play, and he failed again, the argument for keeping him as the future would collapse instantly. If he remained benched under the disguise of injury, the narrative could be controlled, blame could be shifted, confidence could be fabricated. In other words, bench him now to save him later. And that's when the situation detonated on a whole different level when Gabriel's fiancée, Zoe Caswell, publicly jumped into the conversation and declared that everyone in the building wants Dillon to return to the field. That one comment poured gasoline on an already burning fire. Because if everyone wants him to play and he's medically cleared, why isn't he? That single contradiction exposed everything. The panic, the political maneuvering, the broken internal relationships, and the fragile egos pulling strings behind the scenes. And it forced the world to ask, is this really about quarterback development? Or about people protecting their reputations at any cost? One thing is certain, this benching wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. And the consequences are only beginning. Because once social media got involved, once accusations started flying, once the locker room's internal whispers leaked to the public, this story evolved from a football decision into a full-scale organizational crisis. And the moment Zoe Caswell pressed post, everything spiraled into something the Browns may never fully recover from. But that was only the beginning, because the next chapter in this quarterback controversy, it centers around the rise of Shedeur Sanders and how he was set up the moment he stepped onto that field. And what happened next would shock everyone. While Dillon Gabriel stood on the sideline in full uniform, helmet in hand, perfectly healthy, yet mysteriously frozen in place, another story began unfolding right in front of millions. A story the Browns never intended anyone to see. Because the moment Shedeur Sanders stepped onto that field, everything changed. Not because he was expected to save the season, not because the organization believed he was the answer, but because the Browns suddenly found themselves face to face with something they weren't prepared for, a quarterback who wasn't supposed to succeed. To understand why this situation has become so explosive, you have to understand the pressure around Shedeur Sanders. He isn't just any rookie quarterback stepping into a broken offense. He's the son of Dillon Sanders, one of the most respected, feared, and influential names in football history. He's a player whose college highlights had NFL scouts circling Colorado like hawks, a quarterback who became a cultural icon before he ever touched an NFL field. He brought swagger. He brought expectation. He brought hope. And that terrified people in Cleveland, because the dirty secret inside this franchise is that many within the building never wanted this to be a real competition. Gabriel was the safe story, the comfortable choice, the guy the front office could control, shape, and present as their hand-picked future. Shedeur Sanders? He represented change. He represented risk. He represented the possibility that everything they planned could unravel if he succeeded faster than Gabriel. So, from the moment he became QB1, the mission silently shifted, not to empower him, but to manage him. And the evidence is right there on the field. When Gabriel was playing, the Browns' offense looked like a fireworks show. Deep shots, aggressive play calls, a ridiculous 52-pass game that would make even elite veterans shake their heads. The coaching staff opened the playbook wide. They handed Gabriel the keys. They said, go prove you're the guy. But the second Sanders stepped behind center, everything changed. The playbook shrank. The aggression disappeared. The air game vanished. Suddenly, every call was conservative, predictable, and painfully safe. Check down, screen, short slant, punt. The same franchise that handed Gabriel 52 opportunities in one game refused to give Sanders more than a handful of real chances to stretch the field. The same staff that encouraged Gabriel to let it rip put Sanders on one of the shortest leashes any NFL rookie has seen in recent memory. And the message was loud and clear: don't fail. Don't create headlines. Don't make mistakes. Just survive. But that's not how quarterbacks grow. That's how quarterbacks get broken. Yet through all of it, Sanders never complained. He didn't point fingers. He didn't call out teammates or the play calling. He stood in the pocket, took hits, jumped back up, and kept grinding. He showed toughness the stat sheet will never measure, authentic leadership, silent grit, the kind of composure veterans spend years trying to develop. And that's when the public eye turned toward a question nobody inside the Browns building wanted to hear. If Gabriel was given every chance to prove he was the future, why isn't Sanders getting the same respect? Because here's the truth, the locker room feels this divide too. You could hear it in the whispers. You could see it in body language. And according to rumors from inside the facility, players have real doubts about whether the staff ever intended to truly evaluate Sanders fairly. Some teammates reportedly believe that the coaching staff is more focused on protecting their own reputations than developing the quarterback actually giving them a chance to win. That decisions are being made out of fear instead of football reasoning. That politics, not performance, is driving everything. And there's a reason this theory has gained traction. Sanders came into the league with momentum and talent, but instead of letting him build on it, Cleveland put him into a box so small he could barely breathe. Every snap looked like a balancing act, play conservative enough to not upset coaches, but dynamic enough to earn respect. It's a no-win scenario, a rigged game, a setup. And that's where frustration from his teammates started to boil over, especially from wide receiver Jude, who blew up publicly after the last game, furious over his lack of targets. But here's the twist that fans initially missed. Jude was directing his anger at the wrong person. Sanders isn't the one calling safe plays. Sanders isn't the one restricting downfield routes. Sanders isn't the reason Jude is running empty sprints while the ball goes 6 yards underneath. He's simply executing the plays being radioed into his helmet from coaches, terrified of giving him the same freedom they gave Gabriel. And why? Because if Sanders lights it up, if he proves he can hang, can lead, can win, then everything collapses for certain people in that building. The front office would have to admit they backed the wrong quarterback. The coaching staff would have to explain why the offense looked so different when Gabriel was under center. The publicly promoted plan would crumble under reality. Success for Sanders exposes failure for them, and that is the heart of this controversy. It's not about talent, it's not about readiness, it's not even about football, it's about ego. Because if the Browns truly wanted to evaluate Sanders, they would do what they did for Gabriel: open the offense, call aggressive plays, build timing and confidence. Let him actually play football instead of babysitting a broken scheme. Instead, they gave him a script designed to avoid mistakes rather than create opportunities, then stood back and waited for the criticism to begin. The irony? Sanders has already shown leadership beyond what anyone expected. Teammates have praised his composure in the huddle. Special teams players have talked publicly about his motivation and presence. Analysts across the league have praised his talent and resilience. And still, he's being treated like a placeholder instead of a franchise piece. The Browns claim they want to evaluate their future. But how can they evaluate anything when the guy they're supposedly testing isn't even allowed to show what he can do? This isn't just a quarterback controversy. It's sabotage by hesitation. A franchise too scared to pick a direction. A future being smothered before it ever had a chance. And if you think this story is wild now, just wait. Because the moment Gabriel's fiancée opened her mouth online, this went from a football problem to a national spectacle. And the explosion that followed set the entire NFL on fire. The fuse that turned Cleveland's quiet internal disaster into a national firestorm wasn't lit by a player, a coach, or even a reporter. It was sparked by one TikTok comment, just a few sentences typed in frustration by Zoe Caswell, the fiancée of Dillon Gabriel. And what happened next didn't just accelerate the drama. It blew the entire situation wide open and exposed cracks inside the Cleveland Browns that the organization has spent years trying to hide. It started like so many modern controversies do innocently. A comment thread under a viral clip discussing the quarterback situation. Fans debating. Emotions flaring. People trying to make sense of why a medically cleared rookie quarterback was standing motionless on the sidelines like a paid spectator. But then, suddenly, a new username appeared in the thread, and it wasn't just another fan. It was Zoe Caswell. Someone with proximity to the situation, someone with influence, someone people would pay attention to. And in a moment that Cleveland will be talking about for years, she typed the sentence that threw gasoline on an already blazing fire. Everyone in the building wants Dillon to play. Everyone. Every coach. Every player. Every leader in the organization. That's what she claimed publicly, confidently, aggressively. And instantly, the room erupted. Because if that statement were true, then there's only one logical conclusion. Someone in power is stopping that from happening. Someone is forcing Gabriel to sit. Someone is refusing to put him back on the field despite his medical clearance. And if that's the case, then transparency inside the Browns organization isn't just lacking, it's non-existent. But while fans were reeling from that statement, the comment did something far more damaging behind the scenes. It exposed the fractures inside the locker room. Because according to people close to the team, that claim simply wasn't true. Many players weren't supporting Gabriel as the starter. Many didn't believe in him after the now infamous 52-pass disaster. Many reportedly felt relieved, yes, relieved when Sanders stepped into the role. And that's when someone in the comments said the words that ripped the conversation open beyond football. They accused Zoe of being racist. Now, whether that allegation has any basis, in fact, is unknown. No one has confirmed it. No credible source has backed it. But the moment that accusation surfaced, everything changed. The controversy stopped being about quarterback strategy and became a cultural grenade. And suddenly, people around the country, not just Browns fans, started paying attention. The commenter didn't stop there. They claimed again, without proof, that players in the locker room cheered when Gabriel got injured and that he was afraid to go back onto the field. Whether those claims are reality or rumor doesn't even matter at this point. Because the second they became public, perception overpowered facts. The NFL isn't built to handle tension like this quietly. Once these accusations entered the public arena, there was no putting them back in the box. And instead of stepping away and letting the moment pass, Zoe doubled down. She responded defensively, aggressively, emotionally accusing people of having never played in the NFL and insisting they had no right to criticize. It was a classic tactic: discredit the critic instead of addressing the claim. But in that heated moment, what she didn't realize was that she wasn't defending her fiancé anymore. She was fueling the narrative that the locker room was divided, that the organization was directionless, and that this quarterback controversy had officially spun out of control. Because here's the truth: whether Zoe was right or wrong doesn't matter in the world of public perception. What matters is that she said something the organization could no longer control. And when she hit send, she shattered whatever illusion of unity Cleveland had left. And the damage didn't end with her comments. Analysts started weighing in. Former NFL players went live on podcasts questioning leadership. Fans launched threads accusing the Browns of organizational negligence. Videos with millions of views dissected her comments word for word. And suddenly, what should have been an internal football evaluation turned into a televised drama about race, ego, favoritism, and dysfunction. It wasn't just messy, it was humiliating. And at the center of the chaos, a rookie quarterback who didn't ask for any of it. While Gabriel stayed silent, while Sanders tried to keep his head down and focus on football, the conversation spiraled into something irreversibly toxic, and the Browns front office watched it unfold like spectators. No statement, no leadership, no control. They allowed the story to be written for them instead of taking charge. Meanwhile, inside the locker room, damage was being done. Relationships strained, trust evaporated. Lines drawn between players who supported Sanders and players tied to Gabriel. Veterans frustrated. Analysts calling the situation one of the most dysfunctional quarterback environments in recent memory. And the worst part? The entire thing was preventable. Because Zoe wasn't the problem, she was the spark that revealed the problem. The real issue is the lack of leadership inside the organization. A real leader would have addressed the quarterback situation directly. A real leader would have set expectations publicly and internally. A real leader would never allow social media to divide a locker room. Instead, nothing was said. Silence spoke louder than statements. And the controversy fed itself. And while critics argued online about favoritism, race, confidence versus arrogance, and whether Gabriel or Sanders deserved the job, nobody noticed what was really happening beneath the surface. The Browns weren't fighting over who should be quarterback. They were fighting over control. Control of the narrative. Control of the future. Control of the blame. The truth is, Zoe didn't create the controversy, she exposed it. And once the world saw the cracks in Cleveland's foundation, everyone started asking the question that terrifies the front office the most. If the Browns can't even control their own locker room, how can they control their future? And the ripple effect of that one comment is what turned a quarterback decision into full-blown internal warfare. Because behind all the public noise, behind the accusations and debates, there's one unavoidable reality. The Browns are now dealing with a crisis they can't PR their way out of. And the next chapter of this mess? It's about money. It's about ego. It's about a plan that was never about football in the first place. Because rumors suggest Dillon Gabriel was never benched for protection. He was benched to protect the people who backed him. If you really want to understand what's happening in Cleveland right now, don't start with the players, don't start with the coaches, and definitely don't start with social media comments. Start with the money, because that's where the truth always hides. And when you follow the financial trail behind this quarterback disaster, the real story becomes almost impossible to ignore. See, this was never just a football decision. It was never just two rookies competing for a shot. Inside the Browns front office, this was a calculated investment, an experiment designed to justify a belief, protect reputations, and cash in on a quarterback they thought could become a future face of the franchise. And that quarterback wasn't Shedeur Sanders. It was Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel wasn't just another rookie trying to find his footing. He came into the league with strategic backing. He had influential supporters in the organization long before training camp even started. General Manager Kevin Stefanski publicly touted Gabriel as a key piece in their long-term plan. Offensive coordinator Tommy Rees reportedly had a close past working relationship with him and pushed aggressively for his development. And behind the scenes, Gabriel's agent negotiated incentives tied to playing time, a business deal disguised as football opportunity. So when Gabriel walked onto that field for the first time, it wasn't because he earned it, it was because the organization needed him to succeed. And that's when everything began to fall apart. Because after Gabriel's 52-pass meltdown, game one of the most reckless coaching decisions the league has seen in years, the truth became unavoidable. He wasn't ready. He wasn't capable of running the offense. He wasn't the future they bet on. And that realization triggered panic. The Browns front office suddenly found themselves trapped. They had publicly hitched their credibility to Gabriel. They had invested time, money, and political capital in selling him as the chosen one. And in the NFL, nothing is worse than admitting you were wrong. Nothing destroys reputations faster than confessing you backed the wrong quarterback. So instead of facing reality, the Browns pivoted to damage control. And that's where the concussion protocol storyline came into play, not as an injury update, but as a strategic shield. Because if they could hide Gabriel behind medical vague language, they could delay the backlash. They could buy time. They could protect the illusion. They could pretend the problem wasn't performance, it was health. But then something unexpected happened. While Gabriel sat in silence, while the front office scrambled to cover themselves, ticket prices tanked. The Browns' value plummeted publicly. According to multiple reports, seats dropped to as low as $6, a humiliating reflection of fan disengagement. You can't sell hope when nobody believes in what you're selling. And that's when ownership stepped in. Jimmy Haslam, a billionaire who didn't build his empire by losing money, reportedly demanded answers. And the answers he received pointed to one brutal truth. The organization was losing revenue because they were protecting an experimental quarterback instead of trying to win football games. So they panicked again. They scrambled. They threw Shedeur Sanders into the fire not because they believed in him, but because they needed something, anything, to calm the fan base and stop the bleeding. But instead of giving Sanders the same opportunity Gabriel had, instead of letting him take control and compete, the coaching staff went into survival mode. They didn't want Sanders succeeding, because success would expose how wrong they were about Gabriel. It would reveal how deeply they mishandled the quarterback evaluation process. It would make certain powerful voices inside the building look incompetent. So they limited Sanders. They suffocated the offense. They removed every aggressive passing concept. They coached him not to shine, but to avoid proving them wrong. It's not hard to see the logic. If Sanders thrives, Gabriel's supporters look foolish. If Sanders fails, Gabriel supporters get leverage back. In other words, Sanders wasn't being evaluated. He was being contained. And that's why tension exploded even before Zoe Caswell typed a single word online. The foundation was already cracking. Her comment didn't create division, it exposed it. Because inside that locker room, players know the truth. They know when a quarterback is being supported, and they know when a quarterback is being sabotaged for politics instead of performance. They've watched Sanders take hits, get back up, own responsibility, refuse excuses, and lead quietly through chaos. They've seen his potential. They've seen flashes of brilliance hidden beneath conservative play calling, and they also know he's not being given a fair chance. That's why whispers spread. That's why frustration boiled. That's why teammates reportedly cheered when Gabriel got hurt. Not because they hate him, but because they were desperate for a chance to win with someone they believed in. And that's why the front office panicked even more when Sanders began gaining momentum with the fans. If the stadium, the media, and the locker room start aligning behind him, it's over for the Gabriel experiment. And certain powerful people will have to answer for it. So now the franchise is trapped inside its own mess. A quarterback they backed who failed publicly. A quarterback they fear might succeed. An ownership group losing patience. Fans demanding answers. A locker room divided. And a national audience watching every second. This wasn't supposed to be a controversy. It was supposed to be a controlled transition. But when you gamble the future on the wrong hand, sometimes you lose everything. And now, the question hanging over Cleveland is bigger than who starts next week. It's about whether the Browns' leadership even deserves to make that decision anymore. Because if money and ego were the real reasons behind Gabriel's rise and Sanders' suppression, then this franchise isn't fighting a quarterback problem, it's fighting corruption at the top. And the next player caught in the crossfire is already feeling the pressure, the frustrated receiver who became the lightning rod for locker room anger. When the dust started to settle around the Dillon Gabriel controversy, another voice emerged loud, emotional, and impossible to ignore. Jude, one of the Browns' most talented but volatile receivers, finally snapped. And the outburst he delivered after the most recent game didn't just expose his personal frustration, it revealed something much bigger, something that cuts straight to the heart of why this franchise is imploding from within. For weeks, Jude had been visibly boiling. You could see it on the sideline. You could see it in his body language. You could see it every time he jogged back to the huddle after running yet another deep route only to watch the ball dive 5 yards short of the sticks. He wanted the ball. He wanted opportunities. He wanted to prove he was the playmaker the Browns needed. And instead, he spent game after game sprinting into open space with nothing to show for it but empty stat lines and growing resentment. So, after the latest loss, when reporters asked why the offense looked so disconnected, Jude didn't sugarcoat a single syllable. He vented publicly about not getting targets. He called out the lack of trust. He questioned the philosophy of the offense. He even insinuated that certain people weren't doing their jobs. And immediately, the internet pounced on one interpretation. Jude was calling out Shedeur Sanders. That's what the narrative became. Media headlines framed it like a personal attack. Social media ran with the idea that Jude was furious at Sanders for not delivering him the ball. Fans began arguing about whether Sanders was selfish, scared, or incompetent. And once again, the conversation became personal instead of strategic. But here's the truth that almost everyone missed. Jude wasn't angry at Shedeur Sanders at all. He was angry at the system built around him. Because Jude knows what the rest of the locker room knows. Shedeur isn't calling these plays. Shedeur isn't controlling the reads. Shedeur isn't checking out of conservative calls. He's executing orders delivered directly into his helmet from a coaching staff terrified of losing their jobs. When Gabriel was on the field, Jude's life looked very different. Gabriel threw aggressively. He pushed the ball downfield recklessly, yes, but relentlessly. Jude was involved. He saw targets. He saw opportunities. He saw the ball in the air, even if half of those throws were prayers without direction. He felt relevant. But now, with Sanders running a suffocating training wheels offense, Jude has been erased from the script. Route after route wasted. Separation unused. Talent wasted. Energy burned for nothing. So when Jude blew up, it wasn't about selfishness or entitlement. It was the cry of a competitor watching his prime evaporate inside a broken offensive philosophy. But because frustration rarely lands where it belongs, Jude's anger hit the wrong target. Instead of storming into Tommy Rees's office, instead of demanding answers from Stefanski about game planning, he exploded publicly right when the spotlight was already burning hot around Sanders. And that timing made everything worse. Because in a locker room already split between supporters of Gabriel and believers in Sanders, Jude's comments poured jet fuel across the divide. Gabriel supporters used it as ammunition. Sanders' critics claimed it proved he wasn't ready. Veterans privately blamed leadership for letting things reach this point, and suddenly the conversation shifted from scheme failure to quarterback controversy all over again. And that's when analysts around the league began pointing out something critical. This isn't a receiver problem. This isn't a quarterback problem. This is a culture problem. Teams with real leadership don't allow public tension like this to explode unchecked. Teams with real trust don't throw young players into doomed situations, then blame them for drowning. Teams with real direction don't let personal relationships dictate offensive strategy. And that's exactly why former NFL quarterback Dan Orlovsky spoke up publicly, saying he wanted Sanders to succeed but wished people around him would actually help him. That wasn't about mechanics or missed reads. That was about a toxic environment swallowing potential. Even more telling, reports surfaced that multiple players privately support Sanders, describing him as a leader in the huddle who motivates them and keeps composure under pressure. A special teams player even said Sanders has the exact presence a franchise quarterback needs, someone players want to rally behind. So why does it look so bad on the field? Because you can't win when you're handcuffed. You can't lead when you're controlled. You can't succeed when failure benefits the people above you. And that is why this moment matters so much. Jude didn't break down because he hates Sanders. He broke down because he sees the truth. The Browns are wasting talent on purpose, not to tank for draft picks. Not to develop slowly, but to protect egos who can't admit they were wrong about Gabriel. And here's the part that should terrify fans. Once receivers start publicly blaming quarterbacks, the locker room is already fractured. Once significant others start launching attacks online, control is already gone. Once analysts start calling out systemic sabotage, trust is already dead. The Browns aren't facing a quarterback dilemma anymore. They're facing a collapse of identity. And if teammates don't realign soon, if the organization doesn't pick a direction and stand behind it this season, won't just be messy. It will be catastrophic. Because the only thing more dangerous than a losing football team is a divided football team, and this one is breaking right down the middle. There's an uncomfortable truth sitting right at the center of this entire controversy, one that nobody inside the Browns organization wants to say out loud, but everyone outside of it can clearly see. And that truth is this. Shedeur Sanders is being held to a completely different standard than Dillon Gabriel ever was. It's obvious, it's undeniable, and it's the reason this situation has spiraled into one of the most explosive quarterback battles the NFL has seen in years. Because when you strip away the excuses, the distractions, and the public finger-pointing, you start to see a pattern that says everything you need to know about why Cleveland is collapsing under its own weight. Look at how both quarterbacks were treated. When Dillon Gabriel stepped onto the field, the Browns staff handed him full offensive control. They built the scheme around his strengths, or at least what they assumed were his strengths. They encouraged risk-taking. They dialed up aggressive play calls. They let him throw the ball 52 times in a single game, an absurd workload not even most elite veterans attempt, let alone rookies still learning to read NFL defenses. After a performance that analysts described as embarrassing, panicked, and flat-out unprepared, did anyone attack Gabriel publicly? Did teammates call him out in press conferences? Did analysts accuse him of attitude problems or selfishness? Did the media dissect his personality or confidence? No, none of that happened. The narrative was controlled, protected, and softened. He was spoken about delicately. He was defended. He was supported. And when he was benched publicly under the excuse of concussion protocol while secretly being cleared to play, no one questioned his character. No one suggested he was scared. No one suggested he wasn't fit to lead. Now look at Shedeur Sanders. Before he even took his first snap as QB1, the criticism started. The judgment was instant. The microscope zoomed in, and every move he made became a headline. The moment he walked into the post-game press conference and used statements like, "I need to be better," or "I take responsibility," suddenly the media painted him as arrogant. Suddenly, analysts accused him of being self-focused. Suddenly, people questioned whether he cared about the team. Meanwhile, when Gabriel said far less and played far worse, he was applauded for composure. Sanders flashes confidence. He's called cocky. He shows emotion. He's labeled immature. He wears a watch he likes, expresses personality, or celebrates a throw like many quarterbacks do. He's attacked for it. And fans across the country immediately notice something the Browns clearly didn't expect. The double standard wasn't subtle, it was glaring. Even Hall of Famer Randy Moss stepped in and addressed it head-on, saying that Sanders is being judged more harshly simply because of who he is, because of his name, because of his swagger, because he refuses to shrink himself to fit other people's expectations. Moss said something that resonated deeply. Get used to different, because that's exactly what Sanders represents. He's not the cookie-cutter quarterback prototype the NFL has conditioned fans to accept. He isn't a polite, scripted, camera-trained clone. He's real. He's confident. He's emotional. He's himself. And that scares people. It scared the Browns' front office. It scared coaches who wanted controllable predictability. It scared teammates afraid of losing leverage. It scared the traditionalists who still believe quarterbacks should act like lifeless robots behind microphones. And worst of all, it scared the people who are invested in Gabriel. Because if Sanders succeeds, he doesn't just become the starter, he exposes everything that went wrong before he ever stepped onto the field. That's why he wasn't given the same offensive freedom Gabriel had. That's why the playbook collapsed around him. That's why conservative checkdowns replaced downfield aggression. That's why Jude's frustration exploded publicly. They didn't want him to shine. They wanted him to survive. And then be judged for not thriving. It's a rigged test. A silent sabotage, a setup disguised as evaluation. Analysts see it, former players see it, fans see it, and the locker room definitely sees it. That's why so many teammates have stepped forward quietly praising Sanders' leadership. They talk about how he commands the huddle, how he encourages guys when things fall apart, how he's taken responsibility instead of pointing fingers, how he keeps fighting even when the system is working against him. One special teams player even said something that stuck with fans hearing it. He's the kind of quarterback you want to run through a wall for. Do you know how rare that is for a rookie? For someone thrown into chaos mid-season? For someone being restrained rather than empowered? And yet, despite everything stacked against him, Sanders still shows the composure and fight of a franchise quarterback. He still carries himself like a leader. He still refuses to fold under pressure. He still makes plays when given the smallest windows of freedom. And that is exactly why some people are terrified of what will happen if he's truly unleashed. Because if Sanders gets the same freedom Gabriel got, and he succeeds even slightly, then the truth becomes undeniable. The Browns were backing the wrong quarterback all along, and certain egos will have to answer for it. So instead, the controversy dragged on. The finger-pointing grew louder, and the divide inside the building deepened. And now the Browns are standing at a crossroads that could define the next decade of their franchise. Do they finally give Sanders a real shot, an honest evaluation with a real playbook and real opportunities? Or do they continue protecting a failing investment and risk tearing the entire locker room apart? Because one thing is clear, you cannot judge a quarterback fairly when you never give him a fair chance. And if Cleveland doesn't make a decision fast, they won't just lose games. They'll lose players. They'll lose coaches. They'll lose the fan base. They'll lose the future. Right now, Cleveland is standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong decision, one more week of hesitation, one more game of trying to please everyone instead of committing to a direction, and this franchise could collapse in a way that takes years to recover from. Because this isn't just about who starts at quarterback next Sunday, it's about something far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more permanent. It's about identity. For decades, the Cleveland Browns have been trapped in the same cycle, chasing temporary solutions, panicking when things get difficult, clinging to the wrong players, and watching promising opportunities slip right through their fingers. They've gone through more quarterbacks than most franchises cycle through in their entire existence. They've made impulsive decisions, emotional decisions, PR decisions, everything except the one thing that successful organizations do: commit to a direction and stand behind it. And now here they are again, standing at another crossroads. Dillon Gabriel was supposed to be the answer, the hand-picked project the front office wanted to shape, control, and celebrate as their creation. But that experiment blew up in their faces on live television. And instead of owning the mistake, they tried to hide it. They hid behind concussion protocol. They hid behind silence. They hid behind vague statements and carefully controlled messaging. But you can't hide performance problems forever. You can't fake belief. You can't manipulate results. So they turned to Shedeur Sanders, but not with trust, not with respect, not with support. With fear. The coaching staff didn't hand him the playbook, they shrunk it. They didn't encourage confidence, they demanded caution. They didn't treat him like a potential franchise quarterback, they treated him like a temporary placeholder. And that's why Cleveland is now staring at a crisis far bigger than an injury report or depth chart. Because here's the truth. If the Browns don't fully commit to evaluating Sanders right now, not next month, not next season, but today they risk losing everything. If Sanders succeeds when given real control, then the Browns may actually have their franchise quarterback. They could finally escape the endless quarterback carousel that has haunted them for decades. They could build a real identity around a leader with talent, presence, and toughness. They could begin something real. But if they continue suffocating him with conservative game plans, if they continue protecting Gabriel's reputation instead of developing Sanders, if they continue letting social media drama guide decision-making, they're not just delaying progress, they're destroying it. They'll fracture the locker room beyond repair. They'll lose receivers who want opportunities and quarterbacks who want honesty. They'll lose veterans who refuse to waste their careers in dysfunction. They'll lose free agents who won't sign with chaos. And worst of all, they'll lose fans. Because nothing turns a fan base faster than watching a franchise sabotage itself. Ticket prices dropping to $6 wasn't a warning, it was a revolt. Fans are tired. They're done hoping. They're exhausted watching potential get wasted every single year. They want accountability. They want leadership. They want someone to make a decision and stand on it. And Sanders deserves that decision more than anyone. Not because of his last name, not because of his college celebrity, but because he's earned the right to be evaluated fairly. Give him the real playbook. Give him real downfield opportunities. Give him what Gabriel was handed without question. Give him permission to win or lose on his own terms. If he thrives, you've got your quarterback of the future, a competitor with heart, swagger, IQ, and resilience. If he struggles, at least you know. At least you can make decisions based on performance instead of fear and ego. At least you can finally stop pretending. But continuing with this half-measured limbo is football suicide. You can't evaluate a quarterback who isn't allowed to play quarterback. You can't build a team around someone you don't trust. You can't lead a locker room while refusing to pick a direction. And that's why this moment is bigger than stats or schemes. It's about whether Cleveland finally chooses courage over comfort. Because great franchises aren't afraid to admit mistakes. They aren't afraid to pivot. They aren't afraid to take risks or hand power to the player who actually earns it. The Browns have spent years being defined by chaos, and now, once again, the world is watching them unravel in real time. Another quarterback controversy, another divided locker room, another leadership disaster. Another story more about drama than football. But unlike all the years before, this time they actually have something worth protecting. A young quarterback trying to prove he belongs. Not with excuses, not with politics, not with favoritism, with work, with toughness, with faith in himself when nobody else seems willing to give it. And if this organization doesn't wake up soon, they aren't just going to lose a season, they're going to lose the future. So here we are standing at the edge of one of the most defining moments in modern Cleveland Browns history. A franchise that has spent decades searching for stability, clarity, and direction now finds itself drowning in noise, distractions, and internal division. Not because of talent, not because of injuries, not because of lack of potential, but because of fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of admitting mistakes. Fear of giving up control. Dillon Gabriel wasn't just benched, he was protected. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just promoted, he was restrained. Jude didn't just vent, he exposed the cracks. And Zoe Caswell didn't create drama, she revealed it. The truth is, this situation isn't about two young quarterbacks fighting for a job. It's about a franchise terrified to choose, trapped in a tug-of-war between ego and reality. One quarterback was handed freedom and support despite struggling. The other was handed pressure and limitations despite showing resilience and promise. And yet the organization still refuses to admit what is right in front of them. Something has to change right now. The Browns can't afford another week of indecision. Not another press conference full of vague quotes. Not another conservative game plan that handcuffs a young quarterback and suffocates any chance at growth. Not another Sunday where the stadium is half empty and fans have emotionally checked out. Because no matter which side you're on, whether you believe in Gabriel, in Sanders, or in neither, everyone can agree on one thing: this cannot continue. The Browns owe their fans clarity. They owe their players honesty. They owe Shedeur Sanders a real chance, an actual chance to show whether he can lead this franchise forward. If he proves he's the guy, then Cleveland finally has a foundation to build on. And if he fails, At least the organization will know the truth instead of hiding behind excuses and protecting fragile pride. But continuing in this state of limbo is the worst decision they can make. It's poison, it's corrosive, it's tearing the locker room apart and embarrassing the franchise every single day this saga drags on. The coming weeks will decide everything. Will the Browns open the playbook and let Sanders throw? Will the receivers rally instead of pointing fingers? Will leadership step forward instead of ducking responsibility? Will the drama finally die so the football can breathe again? Or will Cleveland become the latest chapter in a story NFL fans know all too well, the story of a franchise with potential that sabotaged itself from within? Because somewhere inside all this dysfunction is a young quarterback trying to prove he belongs. A player who has taken every hit, answered every question, and stood tall through chaos he didn't create. A player who has shown toughness, composure, and belief when the people around him haven't shown him the same. Shedeur Sanders deserves a real shot. Not a political one. A football one. The Browns need to stop running from the truth and finally face it. Not with fear, not with silence. With courage. Because if they choose wrong now, if they let ego, pride, and panic dictate their future, then this won't just be another disappointment. It will be the moment Cleveland lost everything it could have built. So the question now isn't whether this controversy is real. It's what happens next. Will Cleveland finally commit to the quarterback who's fighting for them? Or will they let chaos win again? Let me know in the comments, what do you think the Browns should do? Should Sanders get the keys to the offense? Should the Gabriel saga end once and for all? And is the locker room too fractured to repair? Drop your thoughts below because this story is far from finished, and the next chapter might just be the one that changes everything.